Chapter 19, Old Ground, New Ground. Thank God the program slowed us down at the right time. The braking maneuver worked 100 times better than we imagined and anticipated. Yes, it means that so far everything is working as planned. Now it's part of our reality. I gotta tell you, I'm relieved. You know what this means, right? Amy answered. It means we get to go home in a timely manner and maybe quicker. Yes, there's still a chance to fix things. We were coming in bottom side facing Kepler 6-2, so it did the flipping maneuver for braking and to attract to the star that we call Sol to help with slowing. The power level is back to level 4. I'm assuming that the power level will go down to 2 or so when we get a bit closer to K62. A little bit of time went by. We finally inserted into a wide orbit around Kepler 6-2. This breakthrough will save us so much time. We didn't know if the field around the ship at this speed would protect us from intense heat if too close to a star, and we didn't need to get close. We had all the speed we needed, and it seemed everything was working and reading right. Amy said, "Check this out. This is unusual. The screen is showing 2 planets. Do you realize that we are the first to see these planets that orbit here?" Amazing. 1 minute a weight had been lifted off our shoulders, and I wanted to feel that for a while, but new things were flying at us quickly, new discoveries. It was such a great feeling of excitement. Carl's ideas and programming were well thought out, she stated. "That's why he's on our team," I said. She laughed and said with excitement, because of the joy of relief was so overwhelming, she kept laughing. "Look, it's so beautiful," as she brought up a visual on one of our screens using the telescope. It was our first view of a planet that was in this golden zone, and we both knew what this might mean. The computer had time to learn, I think because it's all networked together. It's giving us mass, size, distance of the ones we passed. Look what's coming up. Rotational speeds, lengths of hours, day, night. "Thanks, Carl," I said, as if he was here. "Check it out. 3 rocky planets with just one just out of the golden zone, closer to the sun. That closest one looks hazy like Venus. The next 2, it shows us, is a Mars and a Mercury type that we pass by, and then 2 bluish white and greenish brown in the golden zone, roughly the distance of Earth from our sun at around 90 million miles, which is a little less, but the sun is a little bit smaller, and the Mars Kepler F planet is at about the distance of what Mars would be compared to Earth. Have you figured out our time, our Earth time yet?" I asked. She sat there looking and processing that for a while. Then she said, "You won't believe it, but yes, you will. Here's what I have. Our whole experience so far has taken us only about 2 days." "Well, that's good." "Well, that's not the worst of it. Earth is 10 to 12 years older, and we were in synchronicity with our timeline of 2 days. Are there any good sides to this?" I added, because I'm starting to feel cooped up in here. "So am I," she said. "Here's a pro. We have aged normally for 2 days, but people back home have aged about 10 years, if I'm right. When we get back, and I know we will, it'll be like traveling to the future. Einstein got that right." "I wonder," she stated, "could it be reversed? Our crew will be older, That kind of sucks in a way. I answered with the truth. In my view, not very likely. The technology to change that, as far as I know, is out of our reach, if it's even possible. After some time of silence, she asked, "Now what?" "Well, we study, we record everything we can. We have a greater control over our flight than I thought, so let's look at those 2 planets in the golden zone and then figure out which one we can boost off of. Hopefully the next one we visit has a strong magnetic field, and then we try to do what we were going to do with Earth's magnetic field and use its vortices to boost off when its alignment is correct. That might help with the time problem when we go home, and that might shave off some of the time lag, maybe. But looking at what we know now, it might not make a difference at all, or not too much of one. I figured if we just floor it when we leave the system, that should save us a few years of time. I don't know if we can top that." She cracked a smile and said, "I know you got this." "I do. Cross your fingers. But it's still kind of sad, but so exciting at the same time. I don't know what to feel. We are lucky and blessed to be alive still. That's the way I'm looking at all this." I agreed with her. I feel relieved now and eager to learn what we can learn here. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she said with confidence. We got busy, and then I said, "I just wonder what it's going to be like when we get home in the future." "Oh well, for now, we get to explore here. What a chance we have here." She smiled again, like I loved to see her do, which was more natural. "There's a trade-off, though." "How's that?" she asked. "We have an opportunity, all right, but if we spend, say, 1 day here learning what we can, our crew will have aged about 4 years or so. But even knowing the time lag, it would be irresponsible not to explore some of Kepler's solar system up close before leaving it." "I read you. We have to do what we can for at least 1 day, so I agree. We have to spend some time here." "I'll get the comm up," she said with excitement. "I'll start listening for radio signals. Which cameras should we focus in on?" "Hang on, let me check. Go with 4 and 8 and put one through on ambient light and one of them on infrared light. That's all we got anyway. Then bring up camera 3 and aim it at where we have flown over and put all of them on separate screens on your side and hit record and magnify and zoom in increments if you see something of interest. As we view all of this, we're going to have some fun." "Okay, my dear," she said. "I'll set up with a time lapse on 4 when we need to until we get there as we approach. Then I'll change it back. Sound good?" "You're the expert. We now will call this one Kepler 62F. "Sounds good. We have about 2 hours before the first orbital insertion of KF. Let's eat. I'll make it while you set up." "Okay, I'm on it," she said, and then added, "I want some ham, baby." "Sounds great, my lovely." As I came back up, I saw that she had the telescope set up and running on screen 4. "Not too shabby," I said. "Well, at least we have a few things to work with." "Anything on radio waves yet?" I asked. "No, not yet. Just static. This planet seems void of any advanced civilization, so no advanced civilization. I'm not detecting any advanced signals on any frequencies, but who knows?" There might be people, but they might be primitive, as was in our case only 200 plus years ago or so. The possibility is still there, though. I made sandwiches and got us some tea. I then had a strange thought, strange feeling. I felt like this was a dream somehow, like an observer. Weird. I decided to keep working. The thought left me. As I viewed all this now during my death throw, I realized at the time it was deja vu, as this is happening now. Check this out. We're coming in at an angle. We will pass near the smaller world first, over there, and then keep going in the same direction. This will be the outer world at the edge of the golden zone first. It seems like they are in perfect places at this time in their orbits, and we will have a pretty good position for observations of both of these worlds. This is going to be great. The alignments are perfect as can be. We can leave one world and be at the other in a short distance and time. The outer world is Kepler 62F, and referencing these, we'll label them toward the star down to an A. The star was called Kepler 62A, so it was logical, and the planets will be done in order logically. Later, we will use one of these planets' magnetic fields while traveling back in the direction of home. As a far enough distance, we'll use Kepler 62A, its field, then later the whole system. I have to figure out the exact coordinates back to our system using everything we know and everything that our tracking program recorded. That should be pretty easy, right? She said. It should be, I said. I'll collect and check that information as we eat. As I did, the navigation computer brought up a sector of space with 6 coordinates and a crosshair that was aimed at a star that we would not recognize anymore. It was now looking back at an unfamiliar constellation that was new to us. I secretly hoped it was correct. If this was it, after the computer flipped the ship around, I would have to also assume that it would recognize the position no matter where we were in the solar system. I would have to command it to do so, then engage the computer for departure later. The programming was set up for the parallax observation for distance and direction from any 2 cameras depending on the position or orientation of the ship, or at least that's what the manual says. This was Carl's doing, so I have faith. What I was counting on was that he was that good. I feel good about what we have to work with. The crew did well, and now I'm so relaxed. Amy turned and came back with a diagram on the computer so we could label the information for easier references. 62B we couldn't see much of. It was like Mercury but larger because the glare from Kepler blinded us. Amy worked with the computer's paint and Photoshop and made this next picture so we could get a feel for what it was we were going to see and expect. She was getting pretty good at this, and so, as our lives depended on our learning capabilities, neither of us expected to be this involved, but we were, and there was nothing to stop us from excelling our proficiency. We simply had to. Looking at Kepler E against Kepler F, we definitely knew we were looking at a water planet, and Kepler F looked more like Mars, but gray instead of reddish, at least at this distance. Amy spoke up after a long silence as we worked. This is so surreal, but I know it is real. I sometimes think I will wake up from a dream, then I get these happy goosebumps. I know what you mean. It's all so amazing, and I get that feeling too. Check it out, she said as we gazed at our screens. Then she stated, Kepler F seems hazy, like a real bad smog, and now with the telescope, she zoomed in. We could see several active volcanoes, so it's geologically active. It definitely must have magnetic field, or I would think so. There are continents and some kinds of oceans. Wow, is all I could say for a moment. It shouldn't be too much longer till we get a closer view. I'll check navigation. We have about a half an hour before insertion. So what's the plan, she asked, when we are in orbit? Well, we'll record the terrain and all the features we can, then decide if we should take a closer look. After all, this technology should allow us to have a closer look. What do you think? I don't know. It's a lot to think about and consider. Good point, I said. You're right, we better not till we know what we're up against to begin with. We'll just observe from a safe distance in orbit. Then she said what she was feeling. It's kind of scary, and it's taken both of our minds to do this, plus my instinct is telling me not to. Don't get close. But it seems to not be about our ship's capabilities, but it could be. If it is, we surely don't want to be stranded on this planet. I forgot what you can do, my smart girly girl. Agreed then. We have enough instruments to measure some of the factors of the system from orbit, so that's what we'll stick to because it might be hostile. It looks hostile, so getting stranded there would not be good. We just didn't know enough about our capabilities, so we were cautious. We should be able to zoom in like our satellites do for mapping using our radar also, so we'll have to live with whatever information we get, and that in itself is very exciting, don't you think? I answered her, you're right, and most time I do think, but not always. That's why I asked you. She giggled, knowing she was right and very smart as I postulated that fact in my own funny way, trusting her powers to read the present and the future. I had to trust her precognitive skills. I knew they existed. We didn't know how strong our magnetic field would be at that slow and lower power and altitude on an unknown planet. We only knew now that in a friendlier, conducive environment it was fine. Like our home world where it was built and tested. It didn't matter there because our tech was based on it there. Here we would need more information. In an extreme acidic atmosphere with a higher conductivity might have a bad effect, probably ruin our abilities to collect ambient energy by our ship's outer hull, which would not be good. We wouldn't put ourselves in jeopardy. If it looked like a duck, well, you know the rest. Our decision not to get too close to this planet by what we could only visually observe was smart by comparing it with air pollution of Earth. Also, we had an instinctual feeling about this planet. We talked about it in that way. This seemed to be a dead world. There might not be much of a magnetic field, and we have no clue how that would affect our capabilities, or if it would. We had not done enough testing, and our craft, we sure wouldn't take that risk. Orbital insertion came up on my screen in 10 seconds. The countdown began. Our computers are working on auto to put us in orbit unless I wanted or needed manual override. Meanwhile, we kept our same orientation since we were weightless, still using the same cameras to keep recording all that we could. Kepler F had a cloud cover that was semi-consistent and purplish-reddish in color, but not as drastic as let's say, Venus. Kepler F had liquid oceans, but they looked polluted, brackish. It looked stagnant, probably because there was no moon, and who knows about plate tectonics here. The clouds in the atmosphere were what appeared to be smog-like, which seemed mostly caused by several volcanoes that were ejecting quite a bit of ash and clouds of gases. Brownish-black clouds covered much of its northern and southern hemisphere, purples, reds, and violet, with very little open sky at its equator. Now and then there were openings where we could see to the ground, which had mountain ridges and plains. Our telescope really made it easy to see detail on the ground, but you would only get glimpses for a half a minute or so at a time through the duration of the cloud cover. I wish we had more scanning capabilities, Amy said. Well, the infrared will do it where we can't see through, and that will have to be processed to understand. It will take us some time to reinterpret that data. That'll be interesting when we can get that done. Yep, we're only seeing about 20% of the surface visually. The ship has been in orbit for an hour or so, and from what we could see, there was a continent below. As it was surrounded by a sea, the continent looked similar to Australia, but twice the size. "Oh my," she shouted, "check that out. It looks like structures of some sort." "Where?" On its east coast." "It's hard to tell right now. We'll have to examine that for a while, because it could be patronicity or pareidolia." "What does that mean?" "It's the phenomenon of recognizing pattern shapes, familiar objects, in a vague, sometimes random stimulus. It's the result of your brain trying to make sense of input that's random." "Okay, that's what I thought. I wasn't sure." "Then, as I see it, I gotta say, it sure does. We have to make sure before we make a claim like that in our report. People do that a lot with NASA's Mars photos, the moon pictures, claiming all sorts of things. It's a very old surface, and if these are structures, they are ancient." "Looks that way, doesn't it? Looks to be about where the equator might be when it clears up. Focus there. I thought I saw something. I'll bring it in on the highest magnification." Then, when she did and focused in, the clarity, what we seen was what looked like to be a road or a wall formation along a road. There seemed to be structures that disappeared under windblown sand, and then they disappear in different directions. These were being exposed by the turbulent storms and winds that look like storms, similar to Earth's hurricanes, sandstorms. There were two in its oceans, 2 hurricanes, and to the east there was one that could miss the landmass, but the other we weren't sure about. These must have covered and uncovered many landmarks. These were also larger than anything we had seen on our weather reports back home, at least twice or more than the size of the largest ones on Earth. It looks like Mars, only with an atmosphere and oceans that are brownish. That's a good description to use, I said. Check it out. There's a dried up riverbed and a delta, more foundational structures all around this area that look like an ancient city on what has to have been the coast. We called it Old Orleans. It's a strange scene, isn't it? Yes, you can picture streets, and look, as she moved the telescope, that looks like a pyramid, a giant pyramid. There's no doubt it was inhabited at one time. I wonder what happened. What do you feel? My feeling is that it was an environmental calamity on a large scale done on purpose. You may be right, but what makes you say it on purpose? Just what I feel. She was adamant. I trust what you feel. It's eerie. There's still a lot to cover. We're going to be busy. You know that we can go through the footage and use our programming to magnify and later make stills to larger size, but there will be a limit now on screen. Oh, I forgot, we could also enhance, change tone, brightness. Well, that's your expertise. Do what you can. That's going to be great to check out when we're bored, if we get bored. That's not going to ever happen. You know, this is going to have a large effect on our assumptions and biases as far as certain religions back home, and the fact that there's 2 Earth-like planets here. Finally, we know for sure we're not alone and never were. Not unless there's some kind of context that makes us wrong about this, like major pareidolia. I don't know if we still will find an answer from orbit without going down there, but they, back on Earth, are going to fling this around in philosophy circles for years, yes? I would think so. We soon approach the night side. I'm repositioning the telescope, and in a few minutes we'll be able to observe Kepler E. That'll be our last stop before we leave. Good, I'm curious to see what our next destination will look like. This will also give me time to get the program set to continue to Kepler E. After this side, we'll stay on the sunny side for a couple hours and allow our cameras and radar to be moved from the equator area to the northern and southern hemisphere as Kepler F reveals itself to us as it revolves under us. Sure, a stationary orbit sounds like a good idea. Then we'll have done all that we can to retrieve as much information as we can. We can't do much more than that. Agreed. This is an opportunity of a lifetime, many times over. We'll do all that we can with what we have. Amy was so into all of this that I was relieved that she wasn't afraid of the situation anymore. I knew that keeping busy would help with our sanity because there were still dangers and distance to consider. We were so far from our mother world, and just dwelling on that left fear creep in. So staying busy helped with that. She aimed the telescope at the next destination. We were done. I then stated it's about a 4-hour journey from here, farther toward the inner planets of the solar system. This would allow us some sleep time. As the picture came up, she focused it, and it became obvious that this planet had ice caps, but they were very small. This might be a true Earth-like planet, she said excitedly. We were shocked, amazed, relieved. Without speaking, we knew that it was a safety net of sorts, possibly a place we might survive if trouble was to happen here, or a rest stop maybe, but also a more interesting place to study. We knew now we were going to be sacrificing another day's worth of years. She then added, "You've been wishing for this for a long time, haven't you?" "Yes. You're reading my mind again, aren't you?" My mind must have been open to her probing as I crunched the numbers. At this point, I wasn't sure if we were actually speaking or were we talking. When busy with chores or distracted, it was hard to tell. "Yes," she had said. "We talked about a lot of weird things, and this wasn't any different, really." But now I said, "You know, if we were in a combat situation, this skill might make us super deadly. If we were in a craft that was weaponized." "I can see that. 4 eyes, 4 hands and feet, 360-degree views all around us. You're right. We should practice that just for emergencies." I agree, knowing where the conversation would lead to, and stop there. Was my military training taking over? I really hated that line of thinking. But if I was manually driving, or rather flying, our computer at that speed might not see things coming. We just didn't know. We knew at a higher speed it would start reading. So I started speaking on a different track, one that took me back. Ever since I can remember, it's been a dream, a fantasy mind to leave the combatant planet we call home and find paradise. My parents' history had a lot to do with that, knowing what they went through during the wars. History of the world suggested life on Earth and humanity might all become extinct. At one point, there was still time for humanity to turn around. What we faced in our future was certain, but still unknown. Amy listened to all my queries so patiently, sometimes adding, sometimes like now making me realize what we stood for, and she kept me thinking positively. This is what I love about you. It wasn't about the money, but the adventure and finding a fix for humanity, right? Yes, my motivation wasn't greed. It was about true freedom, a new start for all. I only felt true freedom a few times in my life, and this ultimate freedom, was a reality. I realized after a long wait, knowing that my theory was probably correct, that financial gain was the way to get a couple of very smart people to help with this, to develop this into a working science. The reward is automatic. It's gonna be there, and there's no way to avoid it. Do you think it was wrong to do that or think that way? No, because we were born into a world of economic dreams. It's the way that our economy is set up, and later with our discoveries, I would make them think on a higher level about the benefits for us and the world. But all of my crew should receive something for their effort, for all the money and time they put into this. Which is, she asked. The reward they would get later would be permanent freedom and doing the right thing morally. Freedom and economic equality being the same, or being some of the reasons I was able to start the project, and that helped them do all of this. Plus the fact that the way of the world was a dead end, and we now know we are killing the planet. With true freedom, we could eliminate a few of the deadly sins which are involved with the wrong technology, which would benefit mankind and set us up as an interstellar traveling species. Or I would hope this is where it would lead. But you never know who's going to shoot at you, as we already seen that happen. Do you think we'll all evolve to a higher level, she asked. Good question. Maybe so. It would be about time. Seems like your abilities have been enhanced. Does that make sense? Sort of. And what other extrasensory skills in humans might become involved to a higher state? Well, I have only one brief demonstration of an extra ability, and if this tech is responsible for increasing it, then we could test what is buried deep in my mind and see if it's true. Hold that thought, she said. As she finished her programming, I was finishing mine, and now we were in perfect orbit around the equator with Kepler F. It was rotating below us. Just then she floated over to the other side of me, and while working the radar input into the computer, entered a few commands, and the radar started scanning and uploading the raw data and recording what could be later turned into a topographical map. Done and done, my dear, she said. Thanks, my love. I still have to finish the input for the orbit of Kepler E. Then, when we are there, it'll be the final calculations next for home. She bent my head backwards and kissed me lovingly and asked, Are you ready to eat soon? Yes, I'll be done here soon. What do you want to drink? I don't know, water, orange juice, please. Then, in a low and manly European voice, she suddenly said, I'll be back. Okay, Arnolina, I said, and I got a giggle from her as I laughed with her. I loved her sense of humor. Then in my mind she continued, Arnolina has something to show you. I swiveled in my seat and saw she pulled her tube top up and flashed me as she pushed herself downward into our lower level. That was one of the things that I loved about her and adored. I tried mind to mind with the thought, I can't wait. She then shouted from below, neither can I. I sat there thinking to myself when she prodded my mind with her thoughts. This seemed to be me honing my abilities. My abilities were always there, and I now was able to gain control and build on them. Thanks to Amy, she always was exercising my mind. I had a slight ability that she didn't. I would learn to use that later. One of them was when you knew someone was staring at you from behind, but they were out of your line of sight, behind your back. The counter to that is to look at them so they know you know they were looking at you. So you look to confirm it to yourself, because after you do this so many times, you have to believe the proof of that kind of sensing. You realize it's true because you have seen it. It is real because they stop and drop their stare knowing you sensed it. Reading the immediate area around you like radar in a sense, like she did, but differently. It's like scanning for other people you can't see, sensing their bodies instead of their minds, but now I seem to be improving my extrasensory perception also, and sensing their minds too. Or sensing one mind anyway. So what is that rare ability? She asked me. Well, my other extra ability is telekinesis. What's the definition? Telekinesis denotes the paranormal ability of the mind to influence matter, time, space, or energy without the use of any currently known physics. I experienced it once, maybe twice, and both times it was my emotional anger or anguish that made it possible, and so I never followed up on that skill to hone it. I never knew that about you. You can do that? She asked. Yes, but it wasn't on purpose. I changed the subject and asked her, when you want it off, what do you do? I mean, let's say, when you don't want to read someone's thoughts. I put up a wall. I think about a word, a tidal wave, or privacy, or a picture of a brick wall. Then she spoke with her lips again. Sometimes I pretend I am the computer and go through the process of Windows that sets up a firewall. But a word will do that. Think of a brick wall and then insist, or rather repeat the words, brick wall. She then added, just wanting to shut it down and talking about shutting it down can work. It just did it for me. We both became content as we ate and watched the scenery on our screens pass by. I am sensing something, she suddenly said. It's not good. Be ready. I believed her. I checked our system. Everything was fine. Nothing wrong with our ship. It wasn't too long till the narrow island continent passed by, the one that looked like Central America and Mexico, and we both knew the giant island continent would be next. This would also mean that we were almost done scanning this world. We found its day and night hours were shorter than Earth's. Hopefully the cloud cover would be gone because this area was of high interest, as well as what we thought looked like coastal city ruins. I know I wanted to see those two sites again if possible. These areas look like what I had seen from satellite photos of the ruins in Mexico and South America. There appeared to be designs like the Nazca lines or roadways. Be a couple of minutes till our radar would be scanning the coast. How big do you think that pyramid is, Mike? I don't know exactly, but maybe 5 times the size of Cheops, the oldest and largest of the 3 pyramids in the Giza necropolis. I was hoping for better luck, but it looks dark and cloudy, very little clearance in the cloud cover. She added, well, no matter what, we'll get the data with the radar. Come on, clouds, give us a break. I get a feeling of what we have seen as structures, but something bad has happened here. She gave me a very serious look and just said, a war happened here. This could be our home world in the future. As the planet spun under us, it appeared where we thought the city, the roads, and the pyramids, the cloud cover started to dissipate more above and around the pyramid, exposing it even more. It was then that something very strange happened. What we seen was a ball of light appearing out of its peak. As this ball of light approached our ship, we felt an overwhelming sense of doom. We froze, wondered in fear at our posts. It was very quick and possessed what seemed to be a similar technology. If it was a solid craft similar to what we operated with, our hesitation caught us off guard as we froze watching all this. The ball of light rose up, spinning, rolling counterclockwise with a tracer effect. It moved toward us, then it got close. It shot out another ball of light that penetrated our ship through our force field. This is a still image on our communication screen just before penetrating our interior space. We had no idea of what this was capable of or of its intention. Amy grabbed me from the side around my shoulder and hung on. Neither of us seen this coming. It was so quick we couldn't react. It penetrated our ship and became a figure like a hologram. This photo is from our inside cameras. This seemed to be a projected image or hologram. It spoke to us. Our first instincts were to communicate, but it responded before we could with, have no contact with this world. It is forbidden under the punishment of death. That voice didn't come through our speakers. We asked why out loud, and in our minds there was no response. It seemed to be a recording. It then vanished with no one behind it to answer us. Both of us knew this was a dead planet. We knew they had been gone for eons. Our sense, and especially Amy's sense, told us, and now we suspected and knew where they had disappeared to. They're not here, I repeated. No one should be able to live down there, not even them. This was also exactly what everybody back on Earth describes, including me. Ugly grays. Yes, exactly, and we both know they are not here. What the hey? We looked at each other in silence for a few moments. Do you see what's going on here? If they're not here, why keep the warning activated? Little graves have been seen on Earth for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It would have been the natural choice for them to come to Earth. Notice that the line of force we traveled here with is linked to our world. There's a power source that made this happen, but for what reason and why leave it on? This is what we seen that day or night orbiting that planet. Next, Chapter 20, Dead World.